So now we are finished with our waistband, but one of the tips that they gave us was to stitch through right at the seam line. So what you do, you're going to go to the side seams, and right here we're going to stitch right in the center of that seam just to stitch the elastic down. So this is called stitching in the ditch. And it kind of makes sense because you're stitching right between those two seams on your seam line, but from the outside. Okay, so get your needle marked up with the seam line, and put your needle down with your hand wheel, and then it will back stitch at the beginning. And then that is just going to secure, and then we're going to back stitch a couple of stitches, and we're just going to come to our stitching that we used for our casing. Needle up, clip, and press your foot up, and that's just going to lock in your elastic on the inside so it doesn't roll, and elastic tends to get twisted a lot of times in a casing. Okay, so I'm going to go around to every seam that I have. So that was the side seam. Here's one of the crotch seams. And I need to make sure your top thread is pulled out a little bit. Okay, again, I'm going to show you how to do that. So you might have to stretch it a little bit to get your needle right in the ditch of that seam. So don't put your fingers in the front here. So hold it out, and it's going to back stitch. And then when I get to that stitching, I'm just going to back stitch a few stitches, needle up, and clip. So then you're going to do that for every seam. So there will be 2 side seams and 2 crotch seams. And then make sure you're cutting all of your extra threads.
Go.
So this is step 8 of our pajama shorts or pants. First, we're going to mark our length for our hem. So this is on the bottom of the leg. Mark depth of hem, trim evenly, press under 1/4 of an inch on raw edge. Stitch close to inner pressed edge. So on our shorts, when we altered the pattern, we made a 2-inch hem. So now we have to mark 2 inches. So remember, you can do this either with your measuring tape or our quilting rulers. And you can do it 2 ways. You can either mark every few inches, just 2 inches. So there's 2 inches. Or you can turn the ruler around and mark a longer length. So there's 1 inch and there's 2 inches. That is just a more efficient way of marking it. Okay, remember your chalk should be at an angle. And then it's always helpful to do some of the steps on the ironing board because this is a leg. So now we have the leg around the ironing board. So I'm going to go all the way around the bottom part of the leg, and I'm measuring up 2 inches. All right, so now that I have that marked, what I have to do first is I have to take it to the iron. And remember your sewing safety. And I'm going to fold up that hem right at the mark. You can always fold it or press it a little bit with your fingers. And then I'm going to press that in place. Okay, remember your sewing safety When the iron's not in use, you put it on its base, and always just remember it's hot. Even when you press on the ironing board itself, after you move the iron off, it's still very hot there. So just do not burn yourself. Okay, so I'm turning it over and kind of pressing it down with my fingers first. And then I'm continuing along the edge of the pajama pants or short. Okay, so now that I have that 2 inches pressed in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it inside out. And because I'm doing a 1 inch rolled hem, so what 1 inch rolled hem means, it means you have 1 inch there and then 1 inch here, which equals 2 inches. So now you're going to put your raw edge right on that fold that you just pressed in. And you're going to turn it, and then you'll press that in. And just go every few inches, okay? So we're turning the 1 inch to match where our first press was, our fold, and then we're turning it again. And then pressing that down. And then as you come to the side seams, make sure that all your side seams are nice and flat before you fold it. So now that we have our hem on the bottom of our shorts or our pants pressed under 2 inches, we went 2 inches first, and then we went another inch, and we pressed it all down nice and flat. Now we are going to pin again every few inches. We're just going to pin that hem closed all the way around the bottom edge of our hem. Okay, remember your sewing safety. Don't have your finger right underneath where you're pinning because you can poke yourself. Just have your finger to the side of where you're pinning. Okay, so now we're ready to go to our machine, and we are ready to do our last step of stitching our hem in. Okay, so this this leg of the hem is pretty wide, so it should fit pretty well underneath your machine. But if you ever have a sleeve where it's narrower, what you can do is you can take off this part of the machine, and then it makes your space more narrow that you're sewing on. So I'll leave that off to show you what that looks like when I'm sewing the hem of the pajama. Okay, so now I want my needle to be right on the edge. So I'm putting the inside edge of my presser foot right on that fold, and then that should give you a nice clean straight stitch. Okay, so I'm going to back stitch, and I'm taking my pins out as I go. And I'm just keeping this folded edge aligned with the inside edge of that metal part of your foot. Okay, and I'm adjusting it as I go, making sure everything's nice and flat. And remember to hold your fabric taut, so hold it from the back. You're not stretching it like that. You don't want to stretch it. Just holding it nice and taut. And make sure you're stopping your presser foot as you take out your pins. And whenever you come across pins that are bent like that, just throw them away because they don't work very well. Okay, so I am going to clip this thread before I get to the end so that thread doesn't get all bunched up in there. Okay, and then I'm going to slow my machine down because I want my stitch to go right over the stitch where I started. So if I keep that channel, if I keep this channel right here where I see that stitching, it'll go right over it. So I'm just going to go a couple stitches beyond where I started, and then I'm going to back stitch. Lift my needle up, clip, and my presser foot is up, and I'm going to clip off any extra threads. And then I'm just going to take it back over to the iron one more time to seal that hem in, and I'm going to press it from the outside. And because we marked where our back was with just that little tab of fabric or ribbon or whatever you can find, now this is our finished pajama pant or shorts.